as well. So welcome. We're going to get started. As I say, we had about 50 or so people signed up for today's event. We've got a smaller number on the call today, which is quite nice because it means we can have a bit more of an intimate conversation. We are going to be recording the session for the people who weren't able to join us today. And today's session is all about a topic very close to my heart. We're talking about the power of collaboration to drive inclusive innovation. So in today's session, what I want us to do together is to explore, well, firstly, what is inclusive innovation? What is it? And then how can collaboration help us drive inclusive innovation? So I want us to dive a bit deeper into the topic of collaboration. So in terms of today, I don't have an enormous PowerPoint slide. I like to facilitate conversation. So I'll be seeding some information and inviting you to contribute to the discussion as we go. I believe that collectively we are stronger and we have more knowledge and insight together. So rather than me sort of stand on a pedestal and tell you how wise I am and how much knowledge I have, let's have a conversation and let's share. So the flow of today, I'll give you a quick intro to Diversily and myself. I'd like to introduce you to the Inclusive Innovation Playbook, which we've just recently launched. I don't know if I have a quick hands up for people who've already seen the Inclusive Innovation Playbook. So not only one of you. Okay, perfect. So I'll provide an introduction to that because I think that will set the scene. And for those of you interested in learning more about the topic of inclusive innovation, there's a lot there. So that's your number one go-to resource. Sorry, someone else joining. I'll then introduce you to what inclusive innovation is by taking you through an image that we're currently working on to add to the playbook. We'll then start talking about why collaboration is essential for inclusive innovation and why does diverse participation matter. Why? Let's set the scene with the why. And then what I'd like us to do for the rest of today's session is to dive deep into the topic of collaboration. So let's explore what is collaboration, what are the foundations for good collaboration, what might be some signs that your organization isn't great at collaborating. And I want us to talk a bit about mindset, because mindset is everything. It affects how we interact with each other. It affects our success in business. It affects how we approach life. It's not often talked about, but it's fundamental to collaboration. And then if we've got time, we can break out into smaller groups. Although given the number of people on today's call, I'm not sure that we'll need to do that because I think we've got a small enough group to be able to have a nice conversation together, which is fantastic. So welcome to Colette and Marcus. If you want. Sorry to Marcus for joining the call. Marcus, if you want to give a quick intro to yourself, everyone else has done that. You're very welcome before we continue. Or if you're not in a place where you can do that, that's fine too.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Marcus McDowell. I'm kind of a multi-hyphenate freelancer. So I lead marketing at Black in Tech Berlin, trying to close the opportunity gap for the Black community in tech, but I also work for One United Bank, the largest Black-owned bank in the US. And then I have other clients that range from startups in Singapore to Mrs. Universe. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and what I do and some of the things I'm involved in. And I'm based in, so yeah, nice to meet you guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So just to start by telling you a little bit about Diversily, essentially, if you're looking to make your organization more diverse and inclusive, more innovative, Diversily is your go-to partner. We cover all things diversity, equity, and inclusion related. And our belief is that creating a truly inclusive culture goes far beyond ticking boxes. It's about embracing diversity, fostering collaboration, and ultimately driving meaningful change, not just for the sake of driving meaningful change, but to create a better society and to get better business outcomes. And Diversily, the sort of joy in what we do is partnering with organizations to help them navigate this journey and ultimately make a real impact. So it's for organizations that are just starting out on their DEI journey or moving on to the next stage. We help organizations embed inclusion into their people, their innovation practices, their products. We help with strategy, culture building, and we're probably most well known for our inclusive leadership program, which we've been running now for several years, and it always gets such fantastic. It's probably the thing that gives me the greatest joy is kind of shifting the mindsets of the leaders who come on this program, who then go about leading their organizations, leading their teams in a completely different way. And I wouldn't describe us as your sort of typical diversity and inclusion consultancy. what sets us apart is our real focus on inclusive innovation. So we understand that diversity and inclusion go hand in hand with driving innovation and achieving better business outcomes. Diversity and inclusion isn't just about fixing your kind of recruitment pipeline and changing your culture. It affects your products and services that you're creating. And we're not really about sort of checking boxes or following the latest trends. What we like to do is form long-term partnerships with organizations, deeply understand their specific challenges and opportunities, and work with them to deliver advice, guidance, strategies, training, workshops, etc., to help them on their journey. And collaboration is ultimately a huge part of what we do. We have a range of partners. So when we can't help an organization, we refer to partners who can. And our approach with the organizations we work with is very collaborative. So it's a great pleasure of mine today to be talking to you about the topic of collaboration, because it's essentially embedded into the work that we do. And an example of a collaborative project that we've just recently, I say it's not really finished because it's a journey, is the Inclusive Innovation Playbook. So I'll move on to talk to you about the Inclusive Innovation Playbook. Essentially, we realized that diversity and inclusion was being thought of as kind of an HR challenge, if you like, and a people problem or opportunity, depending on how you look at it. And we realized there wasn't really anything for product people, designers, researchers, people who are creating products and services to start thinking about how diversity and inclusion relates to those products and services that they were creating. So we set about to try and change this. It doesn't answer all of the questions in the world, but it gives you your kind of foundation to basically answer the questions of why does it matter, and what is it? What does it look like? So that we can help people who don't really know where to start to take those initial steps in innovating more inclusively. And we collaborated with a range of experts from around the world. We had a range of different organizations, from Shelter, who were looking at it, who are a UK charity, to Booking.com, who are a big global online travel agency, to Hitachi, who are kind of enterprise software. So loads of different types of organizations were involved in this process, because we wanted to make sure that the content was pertinent and relevant for a wide range of audiences. And together we created the playbook. And the idea of the playbook is it's very action orientated, and the idea is to give people a bit of guidance and a bit of a steer to start embedding inclusion into their innovation practices. So what I'd like to do now is just talk you through an image that essentially describes how we see inclusive innovation. And I welcome feedback on the image. We haven't yet included it into the playbook, so we kind of created the content, and we're now creating an image to sort of summarize what the playbook is all about. So I'll just share my screen and I will share that with you. So it's currently in Miro, and I will zoom in. So can you see my screen? I've lost my view of you, so let me just pop back.
Yes, we can.
You're able to see my screen, perfect. Okay. So what this is it's the what, the why, and the how of inclusive innovation. So if we start with the what, let's start with what innovation is. So innovation is essentially about creating solutions. And the way we see inclusive innovation is that inclusive innovation is not just creating solutions, but creating inclusive solutions that drive positive change. It's about creating a positive experience and a positive impact for all. So not creating systems or solutions that will be biased towards certain groups. It's about embracing diverse perspectives and embedding inclusion, and it's about countering bias and creating equity. Now, inclusive innovation is not standard practice, but it should be. And the reason, the why of inclusive innovation is that, as well as being the right thing to do, we have a certain responsibility to create a positive dent on the world that we all live in. It's good for business. It can help you increase reach, increase impact, create better solutions, strengthen brand, create equity. But it can also help you avoid exclusion and harm. It can help you stop underserving customers because you haven't thought about their specific needs and you've only been creating solutions for that kind of dominant majority customer. It can help you limit your unrealized potential, and you can avoid untapped talent and insights because people are not operating and contributing to their fullest. And also you can avoid reputational and legal risk. So diversity sparks innovation, and inclusion fuels growth. So that's what is inclusive innovation. And before I go on to the how, I'd like to invite anyone, if you've got any comments on this, how you're seeing this kind of play out in your worlds, or any additions that you'd make to this, I'd be welcome to hear those. Or which of these drivers are kind of prompting you the most to act, if you like. Does no one have any comments?
For me, I quite like the thought of ensuring that countering bias. I mentioned it in my introduction, but I always noticed, at least, that I was sending out a lot more job applications for somebody than compared to like my partner, who is British and has a very white name, like a very British name. So I've always wondered whether the bias of choosing somebody that is more like you to go into a job role that you're recruiting for is prominent. I've always assumed it is, but that's just from my experience. It's something I've always really wanted to challenge in the companies that I work in.
Yeah, fantastic. And it's not just a hunch. I mean, that the data shows that is the case. And I guess if we flip that in terms of innovation, for the organizations that are creating technology to help organizations recruit, we need to start embedding inclusive techniques into those systematic processes, so that it becomes systematically inclusive rather than systematically exclusive or biased in a way.
Yeah, especially because I work with loads of people who use AI and data that isn't naturally inclusive or diverse. It's usually, I think it's naturally quite stereotypical, and yeah, it doesn't take in everything into account. So I think inclusive AI and data usage as well is also quite important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge topic, and I mean the sort of the summary of that is, if you know your AI is trained on real world data, and if that real world is exhibiting biases or there are inequalities, then that will be reflected in the AI that's produced. So there is definitely some, I guess one of the key messages is about intentional action. You know, if we're going to innovate inclusively, we need to be intentional about it, because if we're not intentional, then we will fall into the sort of traditional easiest path, if you like, which means that we're not including, which means we will by default be excluding.
Absolutely.
So let's go on to talk about the how. So, you know, it seems like a good idea. It seems like it's good for business. There's loads of advantages of doing it. There is still resistance in the market. There's no doubt about that. But there's also a good number of a percentage of organisations who are, actually no, this is who we want to be as an organisation, and we've got a certain responsibility. We know it's going to be good for our brand. We're going to capitalise on that market uplift. But how do we do it? What do we do? What do we change? So the inclusive innovation playbook goes about trying to help to define that. So the key message, or the key kind of equation, if you like, is that diverse and inclusive people plus inclusive principles plus inclusive practices will result in inclusive products and services. So there's definitely at the core of all of this is people. There's no doubt about it. But you have to start with your principles. And as an organization, you need to be thinking about, well, what are our principles? So things like one size doesn't fit all is a really important kind of key principle to help you realize that one size doesn't fit all. And we can't just build solutions based on our own assessment of what the market needs, because we've got a limited perspective. We need to be thinking about diversity of needs to build products and services that are either customizable or personalized or targeted to make sure that we are serving everyone equally well. And that doesn't mean we need to expand our target market. A lot of people think that it means, oh my goodness, we've got to create products for everyone. That doesn't mean that at all. We, as marketeers, we focus in on a particular market niche for good reason. But what we're saying is that within that market niche, are you serving everyone equally well? Are people with disabilities being underserved? Are people from different ethnic groups being underserved? Are women being served equally well as men? Are non-binary people, do they feel welcome, feel valued, feel respected within their experiences of your organization, of your products and services? And part of this is about building with, not for, and that comes onto today's topic, which is all about collaboration. It's this recognizing that professional expertise is not the be all and end all. You do need to understand your users in more depth. We've got to challenge inequity. We've got to empower through empathy, and that in itself is another huge topic and something we cover a lot in our leadership programs. And we've got to, as organizations, start flipping to be accountable for impact. We can't just build products, throw them out in the wild and not think about the consequences of those products. And we need to adopt inclusive practices. And this means embedding inclusion into our innovation practices, from making sure that we've got the data and the metrics that give us those insights on our customer data. Have we got a breakdown of our customers by different demographics or different diversity dimensions, so we can see if different users are having, or different groups of users are having, a different experience of our solutions? Do we have the right strategy and governance in place that actually embeds inclusion? Is our research considering diverse perspectives? Are we doing that impact analysis to anticipate the impact? And are we creating designs that cater for all? Are we explicitly testing, not just doing our user testing or our performance testing, but are we testing that diverse needs are met? And is our content resonating with minority groups? Are we using inclusive imagery, inclusive language to make sure that our content is resonating? And as I said before, at the heart of all of this is about people. And as organizations, we need to make people accountable. We need that inclusive leaders in the core, which is why I keep mentioning our inclusive leadership program, but it's at the core. You need the leaders who are setting the tone, who are leading in the right way. You need that inclusive culture, but you also then need to think about diverse participation and participatory techniques. So you can't just bring a whole bunch of diverse people into a room, into your organization, into your research or focus groups, without thinking about how do you engage them? How do you create an environment where they're actually going to want to share? So that's the kind of context, so we can move into our conversation on collaboration, really knowing what we mean by inclusive innovation. So before we move on, again, I'd like to open up the floor for any comments on the how and what inclusive innovation means in your organizations. Any further thoughts from anyone?
I'm Caroline, so I haven't raised my hand. No thoughts, just a sharing really. I work with Basketball University, and we're in an innovation hub. And I really like the way that you described innovation, because I always struggle to tell people what it is. So finding solutions, I'm going to beg you if I to be able to use that as well. I copy you. But a very interesting concept of inclusive innovation. It's something that we're really considering at the moment, and should have been for a while actually. So apologies for not getting around to it sooner.
Oh, thank you for sharing. And this image that we're creating will go into the inclusive innovation playbook. I'm not sure if you recall when we first started talking about it, but the inclusive innovation playbook has been created with a Creative Commons license, which means that people are free to use the content as long as they credit Diversily for what they've done and they reference the changes. We've created it in a completely collaborative way. We want it to grow and get better as more and more organizations and institutions start adopting the practices. So the idea is to share and become better together and share more. As people have case studies, then those case studies can be added into the playbook, and it can grow and share. So the philosophy of collaboration is it's embedded, and we'd absolutely love you to start using some of this content. Give it credit Diversily for the source, and obviously we can partner if we want, for organizations that want to kind of go deeper. And you can't just throw a playbook at people and go, right, there, go do that now. People need to be taken on a journey, and you need to think about how you can adapt it to your particular circumstance. So thank you for that, and yeah, very happy to talk separately about that. Okay, so that is, we've talked about what is inclusive innovation. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'd like to move the conversation on to then talk about collaboration, which is what this event is about. And why is collaboration essential for inclusive innovation? Who would like to maybe start us off with why do we need to collaborate?
Well, for me, it goes back to your slide around diverse perspectives. Everybody has got a slightly different perspectives. There might be, alignment in terms of, some of the core attitudes, but pretty much everybody will have different experiences, different perspectives, and value to the discussion in whatever shape or form.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we need to recognize that and also value that. Sometimes, you know, the junior team member's perspective isn't valued quite in the same way as the senior, or the person who's experienced racial discrimination. Oh, it was just a one-off thing and they're probably being a bit sensitive. Well, actually, maybe not. Maybe there's something more systemic going on, and you know, we do need to value people's experiences and start incorporating that more broadly into the solutions that we create. So absolutely. Who would like to build on that? Why is collaboration essential for inclusive innovation? Yeah, go for it, Marcus.
Hey, Bill, comment. I'd kind of like to flip it too here and extend off of what Andy said, and what you had pointed to in terms of junior team members. I think both from innovating products, we also can kind of radically reimagine the internal effects. So to your point of collaboration with junior members, I think when you have collaboration, it involves everyone's voices, but it also contributes to retention. And I think it's better for the organization when you have people who have recognition of their impact. So I think with collaboration, you have people invested in a project, and they're probably hungry to go find more information. It builds curiosity. So people will become comfortable with being uncomfortable and then learning more about everyone else on the team, because I hope sorry, something almost blew over in my room. The wind in Berlin is crazy. I was saying, I lost my train of thought, but essentially I was just trying to get at that with everyone's voice included, it builds greater solidarity, curiosity from members on the team who might not be comfortable or familiar with these topics, and then it expands kind of their awareness. Having voices constantly recognized in the team, but then giving the permission. I think that's a big thing with collaboration, is many people keep information and they don't feel like there's psychological safety or trust to kind of input their valuable perspectives into the team dynamic. But when they see that there's a collaborative nature, I think it unlocks a lot of value that's just completely overlooked. So yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about mindset in a bit, because I think that's really important. This idea of, I want to hang on to all the information because it's going to be better for me versus I want to do best for the team. So you touched on a whole host of things there. We talked about diverse perspectives. There's also something around collaboration within your teams to create an environment where everyone can thrive. And as a team, if everyone's thriving, we're better as a team. If one person in the team is not thriving as a team, we're not doing so well. And if two people in the team are not thriving as a team, maybe suddenly our performance starts to shift. And we need to create that collaborative environment collectively in the team. It also enhances creativity and innovation, which I think is something you touched upon. There's something about being more user-centric in our design. So by incorporating diverse perspectives, we can not just cater for that, that single persona, that dominant majority persona. We can be much more user-centered. It gives us access to resources and expertise that we might not have access to. Collaboration it opens things up for us. It increases our impact and our scalability. If we're talking about collaborating with other organizations or partners, suddenly we can achieve so much more together. And it creates opportunities for learning and growth. If I surround myself with people who are just like me, or organizations who think and act just like me, just like us, I don't really grow. What do I learn from them? Whereas if we surround ourselves with people who are different from us, there's so much opportunity for growth. And so we talked about inclusive innovation. We talked about why collaboration is crucial for it. And this idea of diverse participation mattering is sort of at the heart of it. And one of the biggest mistakes that product people or design teams make is that they think that they know what their audience need based on their own experiences. But as innovators, we're on a quest to solve problems. We talked about that in our definition of what inclusive innovation is, and we're not accounting for the fact that people experience problems in different ways. So I'll give you an example. When we were creating the playbook, I mentioned that we were working with shelter, and we talked about the problem of homelessness. And someone who is the white experience of homelessness may be very different to the black experience of homelessness. And someone, for example, who's in debt, that the female experience of being in debt may be very different to the male experience of being in debt, because they're different pressures, they're different expectations. So as organizations, we need to start getting better at thinking about this intersection between different aspects of diversity and the problems that we're solving. And we can't just solve for the dominant majority. And just to be really clear, this doesn't just apply in a B2C environment. In a B2B world, people are still at the core of everything that happens, right? People are still using the solutions, people are still interacting with each other. So we still need to think about diversity and inclusion. And sometimes we can think around, are we centering in a B2B world? Sometimes we can be creating ecosystems and sometimes almost kind of global paradigms where smaller organizations don't have as much say as larger organizations, or the white experience is centered over other experiences. And actually we need to be thinking about these things. Whose experiences are we centering? What shifts are we creating in the societies who are impacted by the products and services that we create? So the key message here is to truly achieve inclusive innovation. We've got to ensure that diverse individuals and communities are actively involved in that innovation process, from ideation to implementation. We can't sort of pop them in at the end and say, what did you think about this? Because one of the things to think about when it comes to collaboration is this idea of at what stage are people involved? So is there a sort of generative collaboration, or is it a reactive collaboration? Is it we're going into this together and we're going to solve this problem together, or I've already done the thinking and I just wanted to quickly get your thoughts on this one thing? It completely changes the dynamic. It changes the power, it changes the incentives, it changes the motivations, it changes the control. So when you aren't thinking about building collaborative partnerships with other organizations or collaborations within your own organizations, you've got to think across the life cycle or the stages of your project and think, when is the right time to bring people in, because it changes things. And generally the earlier the better. But there is a balance, right? The more people you get involved in anything, the more complicated it gets, the harder it gets to make decisions. And it can become more complicated. So it's always about finding a balance. So when we're talking about collaboration, we're talking about collaborating internally with cross-functional product teams, potentially co-creating with customers, collaborating with partners, with community members, with advocacy groups, with industry experts, or with regulators. So we're not constraining this discussion to who are we collaborating with. We're talking more broadly around some kind of philosophies for collaboration. So when it comes to collaboration, maybe we define what we mean by inclusive innovation. Does anyone want to have a go at talking about, well, what is collaboration? What do we mean by collaboration?
I'd like to comment on how it makes me think of an example, a company I heard speaking about their ESG, environmental social governance, and they said for the environmental, they were really vulnerable with a network, and said we run a data center locally and we have so much heat waste that we don't know what to do with it, and it's really ruining our sustainability targets. And they ended up working collaboratively with the council and heated a local swimming pool at the leisure centre with their waste. But it took the vulnerability of being like, we have this problem, I'm going to make it public so that we can find a solution. And somebody's waste is somebody else's treasure. It's that whole mindset of, I need to be able to speak openly and freely and have my opinion be valued, so that I am able to help others and potentially help myself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example. I love it.
I saw that headline. That was genius. Absolutely genius. So
good.
But it's also, there's something there about thinking bigger, right? If you're only in your world, you're thinking it's a problem, but you've got this heat. It's an opportunity, right? What can you do with it? Let's think bigger, and then we can create more solutions. Anyone else want to sort of have a go at what that was a fantastic example of collaboration, but what is collaboration? Or other examples are welcome to.
I've just sort of added, you know, when you're sort of asking about why collaborate, you know, it's about those supply chains, you know, about reaching out and looking at all aspects of your, you know, project manufacture or the service delivery, and how you can support a wider group of people, whether it's, you know, through employing within a local area, or only sourcing materials, you know, from local suppliers, or in a more sustainable way. Sort of, like I said, by having those conversations, creating opportunities, whether it's at like networking events or through webinars, or, you know, like yesterday I was in Bath at the Apex Hotel for the strategy event for Digital Festival. You know, it's just having that and being aware of what's happening in your area, what's happening nationally, and also from a global or government perspective. You know, how can you support that vision and that message of somebody else, you know, in very small ways. And it's that ripple effect, isn't it? You know,
yeah.
So it's lots of things you can do to support collaboration and various benefits along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think at its essence, you can probably summarize it in 2 words, which is creating together. And that can apply to your external partnerships, and it can apply to your internal teams and your cross-functional teams, and you know, siloed organizations who don't talk to each other. It's ultimately, it's about creating together. And often, sometimes people confuse communication with collaboration. So they're like, well, we've got Slack and we've got Teams and we've got our daily stands and we do all these things. And it's, well, actually, that's communicating, and communicating and collaborating are very different things. There's some sort of principles, if you like, at the heart of collaboration that don't necessarily exist in a communication. Collaboration is having a shared why. There's some shared why. There's some reason as to, you know, you've got there's a shared value, or there's a shared reason as to why you're doing this. Communication doesn't necessarily have that. Collaboration is about trying to find these win-win outcomes, and collaboration is around recognizing the share of power and where that plays out. Communication is about sharing information, and communication is essential for collaboration. I think it's very difficult to collaborate if you're not communicating effectively. But collaboration, it expands perspectives, it fosters collective intelligence, it builds trust and relationships, it drives innovation, and ultimately it amplifies impact. And amplifying impact is really what we want to do. So I thought it might be useful to just talk about some signs of, if thinking about organizations who are good at collaborating and organizations who are maybe not so great at collaborating, what might some signs be, either good signs or bad signs? What kind of things have you seen within organizations? And this can be related to the ability of teams to work well together inside the organization, but also their ability to partner with other organizations outside. Should we start with the good, maybe? Yeah, go for it, Marcus.
Hi. I think from my primary experience, I can speak about large organizations versus smaller organizations, and I've observed smaller organizations kind of do it better by the nature of how they're set up, because everything's closer. People have more intimate interactions or conversations. So I think when the team is smaller and you know everybody, I think you have a greater connection, and then collaboration, but also openness, I found, is much more free. So for example, at the bank, the president and the COO would actively want to have the interns contribute to, we call them pride sessions, where everyone comes in and kind of gives updates of the week and what's important to them. And I think that was one of the greatest things to bring everyone together, increase collaboration, but also it helps leadership understand what's on the mind of the youngest people in the organization, so that they can kind of get a gut check, but also just probably be informed about things that maybe they themselves in their bubble or their apparatus aren't coming in contact with every day. So I thought that those were always great ideas, or great examples of collaboration, because it starts the conversation, kind of like you said, with communication, but then kind of takes it to action items or things that we want to do after. that are important touch points in the conversation.
Yeah, fantastic. You've covered quite a lot there. And a lot of that actually is about inclusion, right? It's about making people feel part of it, able to contribute, their contributions are valued. There's something around shared decision making. As your organization gets larger, it's thinking about how you can collaborate across functions. So as opposed to having these kind of silos. Definitely something about open communication, which you touched upon, and this notion of empowered teams who are feeling empowered, able to take control, able to know that they can take action without being micromanaged or being checked on. There's also something around having a learning culture. I think that really helps people. It sets teams up to be able to collaborate, because they're learning, they're experimenting, they're progressing. You mentioned psychological safety, which I think is kind of key. There is something about having the right tools and technologies in place to support collaboration. Some organizations don't have that, and that can stifle things. And then there's also something about the recognition and the rewards, which I think you touched upon, is people being valued for their contribution. So there's quite a lot there, and you can kind of think about some of those things in the context of your organizations, or the organizations that you work with. If you're thinking about partnering with an organization for these kinds of things, these aren't in place, you might struggle in terms of creating those collaborative partnerships. So then moving across to sort of think of, what's the kind of opposite of that? What are some signs that an organization is not going to be great at collaborating, either internally, with the people inside the organization, or with others? It's almost the opposite of what we've just been talking about.
Yeah, you notice that, the team itself can be less motivated, mentioned like recruitment and retention. It's that whole vibe, when people aren't feeling engaged and motivated, whether that's engaging internally. So work for a large council, so there's a lot of people we don't know, but there are opportunities that supporting businesses that spans across many service areas. So it's like by sort of reaching out to them, how can we better understand your role, and so you can support us, and vice versa. But also, looking out to, we try and engage with our customers, our tenants, as well as our business networks and people in the local area. What's happening? How can we be part of that conversation? How can we facilitate some of the change? It might just be that we host a meeting, but it draws like-minded people in to start the conversation running. But when that doesn't happen, you can see that the area, the organization becomes quite flat, and therefore it doesn't drive investment. I'm sure like Business West and Weka will sort of touch on that. It's creating that vibe in the area. If it's not happening, then people will go elsewhere. Swindon and Wiltshire is a case in point. Like a lot of people go sort of Oxford, Bristol, Bath, but there's a lot happening in the Wiltshire area. So it's sort of how we can support that, how we can share it to make sure that we're not missed out in those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, some of that comes down to there can be communication barriers. Sometimes there can be a lack of trust or empowerment. Sometimes organizations can be really bad at conflict resolution, because the thing about diversity is that your goal is not for everyone to agree. Your goal is to understand more diverse perspectives, which means you're more likely to have conflicts and disagreements. But it's about managing that in a respectful way. And organizations who aren't set up yet to manage conflict well can sometimes struggle with collaboration. Organizations that don't recognize collective achievements, so it's all ego-driven cultures, and it's this was my win, not our win. Top-down decision making and siloed departments can also sort of get in the way, where you've got just different agendas. So there's a lot to think about, and I find this fascinating. And a lot of the work that we do is helping organizations really think about, well, which of these challenges or which of these opportunities are going to be the ones that are going to help their organization to move forward. And sometimes it's just about opening up conversations, observing behaviors, and seeing which of these are playing out for us, and what are some of the things that we can do to try and change that. And some of it's quite deep rooted, it's kind of cultural change, which doesn't happen overnight. And some of it can actually, there are some quick wins often that can be put in place to try and drive change. But a lot of it, as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, comes down to mindset, right? It comes down to the way that people are thinking as they approach these conversations. And I want to get you thinking about the difference between a scarcity mindset and an abundance mindset. So before I sort of talk about that in a bit more detail, has anyone come across those sort of terms before? You'd want to maybe share with the others, what they think the difference between a scarcity and an abundance mindset is. You don't have to if it's not something you're familiar with, but if anyone wants to, feel free. No? Okay, in which case I will continue. So there are essentially two contrasting perspectives or attitudes towards life, towards resources, towards opportunities. So let's start by thinking about resources. Okay, so an abundance mindset is characterized by the belief that there are plenty of resources, there's loads of opportunities, there's possibilities everywhere for you, for me, for everyone. And it focuses on the idea that there is enough for everyone and that success isn't limited. It promotes a positive and optimistic outlook. Whereas a scarcity mindset is more marked by the belief that resources and opportunities are limited. There's not quite enough, there's a finite number, they're hard to come by. There's a fear, there's a lack, there's a competition. My gain is your loss, and this mindset can foster negativity and a sense of kind of constant need or deprivation. And now the thing about these mindsets is they're not fixed. We don't have one of these mindsets all the time. Our situation can create these mindsets. Sometimes we are in a situation where scarcity is the reality, right? And that changes our mindset. Sometimes we're in a situation where abundance is a reality, that changes our mindset. But quite often we're in a situation where you can come into the same situation and you can have an abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset, and that will change your dealing with the situation, even though the situation hasn't changed. So by becoming more aware of these mindsets, you can put the work in to foster the mindset that you believe is going to drive the best results for you. So we talked about resources. Let's now talk about success, right? So an abundance mindset see success as unlimited, and it's within reach for themselves, it's in reach for you, it's in reach for everyone. Achievements are something that can be obtained by taking advantage of opportunities. You take advantage of opportunities, you learn from failures, and you leverage your strengths, and you embrace challenges. And setbacks are temporary setbacks, right? You're always learning, you're always growing, you're always improving. Whereas with a scarcity mindset, you may perceive success as this kind of elusive thing that's difficult to achieve. You may feel threatened by the success of others. So other people's success makes you feel bad. It makes you feel less. It makes you feel kind of othered in some way. You might feel that if someone else succeeds, that's going to make it harder for you to achieve what you want to achieve. And this can lead to a fear of failure. It can lead to a reluctance to take risks, and a tendency to focus more on limitations rather than possibilities. Okay, so it affects how you perceive success. It can affect your well-being. So an abundance mindset generally promotes a more positive and optimistic outlook. It kind of encourages things like gratitude and contentment and a sense of fulfillment. And it can lead to increased happiness and resilience and this kind of greater sense of well-being. Whereas a scarcity mindset can generate more feelings of fear and anxiety and dissatisfaction. And we've been talking today about collaboration. So these mindsets affect how we collaborate, right? So people with an abundance mindset are often more willing to collaborate. They share knowledge, they share resources. This is one of the things we spoke about at the beginning. I'm going to hold on to the knowledge because I want to be promoted because I'll have the power. People with an abundance mindset believe in the power of cooperation and synergy and creating win-win situations. And they understand that by working together, we can create more value and opportunity for everyone involved. Whereas with a scarcity mindset, people tend to foster a more competitive and guarded approach to collaboration. And they might be more reluctant to share information, resources, or opportunities for fear of losing out or thinking it's a zero-sum game. So the reason I wanted to talk about mindset is that as you're going into any kind of collaboration, whether it's internal teams or people, other organizations, starting to tap into the mindsets that exist is going to change the way that plays out for you. And people can be, ultimately, there's only really two states of mind, right? We're quite simple beings in some ways. Our brain can either be in a kind of powerful state of mind or a primal state of mind. And there's different sort of theories out there that call them different things, but one's essentially a positive frame of mind and one's a negative frame of mind. And our frame of minds affect the chemicals in our brain, right? So if we're in a positive frame of mind, it creates dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, which cause happiness and connection. They actually help us bond and create relationships with people. If we're in a stressed, negative frame of mind, we release cortisol, and that puts us into this kind of fight or flight mode, which means that it changes how we behave, right? It impacts our feelings, it impacts our outcomes. So team performance and collaboration kind of potential is directly related to how people feel. So if we can create environments where people feel joy and calm and happiness versus feeling disappointment and anxiety and stress and overwhelm and shame and all of these kinds of things, we create the environment for success. We create that environment. So emotions is something that's often overlooked in business, but if we're moving into a world of innovating more inclusively, my message is we can't just ignore them. They're there. So let's create the environment where these can be to enable people ultimately to thrive and to enable people to collaborate effectively. So I hope that's kind of got you thinking a little bit about mindset, and maybe your mindset. What are some of the things that when are you switching into these different modes? I wanted to end today's session with a little bit of an exercise on failure in a way. So we talked about the abundance mindset being all about having this opportunity for growth. And one of the things about collaboration is you can learn from not just my mistakes, but everyone else's mistakes. So in this spirit, I'd like us all to think of a recent example of a mistake that you made at work. Something when you messed up, you got it wrong, you misjudged a situation. You did something that you're not necessarily proud of, and you got it wrong. So I'll just pause for a moment to give you a chance to think of something. Now, would anyone like to share such an example? Now that silence is very telling, and this is actually not an exercise in failure. This is an exercise in psychological safety. What I actually want us to talk about is your mental internal dialogue that you had with yourself when I asked you to share a moment of failure. Okay, because I don't want to know about your failures. I don't want to put you in that situation. What I do want you to recognize is that to create this collaborative environment where people share their mistakes, where there is psychological safety and people are able to admit their mistakes and disagree with each other, it doesn't just happen, right? We've just come together today. It doesn't just happen. There's an internal dialogue that says, am I safe to share? Is this okay? What are the consequences of sharing going to be? Why do I want to do it? What's in it for me? And that's what I want to get you to think about. So I'd be interested in anyone, if anyone's happy. I don't want to know about your failures. I want to know about that internal dialogue that just happened. Please go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's sort of along the lines of a recent conversation. I've got a mentor at work because I'm on an apprenticeship program, and we're saying about those vulnerabilities. And with the team, as the team was growing, I've sort of said, actually, I don't know everything. I don't know these things and how I feel. And I think through those vulnerabilities, our team has become stronger because other people are sharing. And so it is not quite failure, but I suppose it is a vulnerability because you're scared of getting it wrong or saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing. So I think sort of being vulnerable is key. And actually, as a result of me taking the risk and sort of being more open, conversation has increased, activity has increased, that whole being collaborative within our own teams and generating ideas. That there's definitely been a shift in the last few months. So yeah, that's sort of my take on what you've just said.
Yeah, fantastic. And that's huge. And that's something that we talk about a lot in our inclusive leadership programs, is giving people, because it's terrifying, right? I'm the leader, I'm going to know everything. I'm going to have all the answers. I don't want, be vulnerable. So that shift and realizing the power that comes with that, and also realizing when it's right to, there's a science talk about showing your scars, not your scabs. I can talk about this for ages. I'll let Marcus continue. Go for it, Marcus.
Sure. I came to a revelation, not a revelation. I think I know this. I constantly hearken to it. Often, I even made a LinkedIn post once. I had been accepted to business school, and I was thanking all the people who were involved, and they all happened to be women. And at the end, I was like, that's no coincidence. But I think it's also kind of indicative of spaces that I feel secure and safe, and I don't have this extreme, like I don't have this palpable mental check-in. When I'm in a space like this, I'm probably going to actually say something, but I'm aware of how I kind of police myself in male-dominated spaces, because there's typically that, I don't know, it's funny because they have some of the most abundance in terms of privilege and access and resources, but there's this extreme level of scarcity or this competition where but maybe it's also just men aren't as vulnerable. But I've noticed when you are vulnerable, you gain a lot of respect, because I think many people want to be vulnerable. So I've been in situations where I was raised to be on the defensive all the time, but then observing a male leader with the more female skill sets of vulnerability, communication, typically I resonate more deeply with them, and I want to engage with them. And I think everyone else kind of does this relaxation, like this decompression. And then everyone kind of wants to, back to our topic of collaboration, they want to contribute, they want to become more involved. Yeah, that's just my observations throughout my life. Where I want to contribute is typically much more female spaces, because it's more collaborative, it's more vulnerable, and there's less of that scarcity mindset.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. We've only got a moment left, but let's hear from Bella, and then we'll close off.
Just my thoughts on that were that I struggled to find something that I had failed in at work, because I feel like I have got a very supportive manager and workplace. So they never felt like failures. They felt, I have this phrase, it's like compost. So it's something that something grows from it. It's never just waste. It's compost, something it's going to develop from that failure, from that. It's a learning. So yeah, so I guess it's the mindset thing.
Yeah, absolutely. My son, when he was in, I think, year 1 at primary school, came home and told me that FAIL stands for first act in learning. So
oh,
I was
nice.
very proud of him.
Steal that.
But yeah, what a lovely way to end. So I hope that was a useful session. I hope that was an interesting exercise, just in getting you thinking about failure and the importance of psychological safety to kind of underpin all of this. We run out of time, but what I do want to get you thinking about is, we've talked about inclusive innovation, we've talked about collaboration, but ultimately, what are the ways in which you can optimize your collaborative efforts when you have got diverse perspectives, diverse people involved? And there's a page, we don't have time to go through it now, but there is a page in the playbook which talks all about diverse perspectives, and there's a whole bunch of ideas on there on things that you can do to essentially guiding principles for soliciting input from diverse perspectives. So how do you make sure you're valuing diverse inputs, you're seeking out diverse perspectives, you're not making assumptions about people, you're creating a safe space, you're thinking about the power balance, you're creating those conditions to receive honest feedback. So I invite you, if you haven't already signed up to the playbook, which I think most of you haven't, the diverse participation page is the one that would cover some of the things that we've been talking about today. I recommend you have a look at that. So with that in mind, if anyone wants to stay on the line for a moment to have a kind of more of a one-to-one conversation, I'm more than happy to stay on the line. And if anyone wants to share their reflections, please feel free to stay on the line. But I also want to respect your time. So thank you all for joining today. I hope you found it to be a valuable session. If you know organisations that are looking to progress on their diversity and inclusion journey, specifically innovative organisations looking to develop their leaders, looking to develop their diversity and inclusion strategies, then please remember Diversily, recommend us, make the connections. We're a small organisation who deliver high impact. We don't have huge marketing budgets, so we rely on recommendations. And on that note, I will bid you all farewell. So if anyone had any further comments, please feel free. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of the day.